Hello, everyone. Welcome to Out of Control Aftershow. We have disrobed. No, I'm just kidding. We are the normal human versions of ourselves. We hope that you enjoyed the show. But of course, what we like to do at the end of shows is we do an after show. Normally, these are up on our Patreon for our patrons, but the final ones, and since this is a one shot, we're giving you a little taste of what they're like. We usually do live, so we're doing this one live because Craig was like, yeah, let's do an after show. So we definitely have some questions for you, but to start off, does anyone have any stars? We normally do stars and wishes, so I think we probably won't do wishes unless it's like, hey, we all want to play together again, because I think that's a wish. But anyone have any stars? And usually these are moments in the story that you weren't a part of necessarily. Like, it should be somebody else's moment that you think was great. Anyone have any favorite moments?
Give my love to Katie for the first existential crisis.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gotta get a little existential crisis in there occasionally.
I think I'm gonna do a started trooper for your heart speech.
Oh, that was so
That zombie be
good.
a heart. That's fun. I liked that a lot, and it was just so cute. I loved it.
I loved all the things you did with Help Dot, with like the survey and stuff like that. It was very, very like help desk oriented, and I could see that being like a real program that people would interact with.
I have to give a star to Maggie for distracting the three little OS and just like all the questions. Every single thing is so good.
Just overload them with weird, mundane questions.
What does that do?
Your idea of it, Craig, of it being like a child just asking nonstop. I was like, that's exactly perfect. Because also I had like one mind. So probably not asking the most important good questions that we need answered.
One mind club. High five.
High five. Actually, I was negative mind, but you said like we couldn't roll no dice. So I actually got to roll a dice even though I was at a disadvantage.
You always get to roll at least one die. You don't automatically fail. That's boring.
Yeah.
I mentioned Katie finally getting the dice roll to go in her favor and just persevering. I appreciate perseverance. But I also was very pleasantly surprised. I was pleased with, we talked before the game. This is a little how the sausage is made, a little inside scoop.
Yeah.
We talked about how wackadoodle, as Margaret likes to put it, was this
Yeah, it's like, how wackadoodle do you want us to be?
It can get goofy and fun, and you build the role, have the role playing moments, and really have a lot of fun with it. But this is also like the apocalypse, and some really terrible things can happen. And I inserted, I saw we had the time, so I was like, I'll do this little insertion of the plane quake taking place, and that poor Proc getting embedded in the wall. And there was at that point literally nothing you could do to help them other than to ease their pain.
Yeah.
And so putting, kind of taking a sidestep into like, this is serious. And all of these kind of stepped up and figured like, well, we'll make sure that they're not experiencing pain, and we'll come back for them and
I think it was a very
we'll help them.
Transitional moment for us all, because I think a bunch of us took negatives because of that. I think almost all three did. I don't remember if Firewall did, but I know the rest of us did for sure.
I didn't, just because I looked at my stuff and I was like, I don't think it would apply in this scenario, just when I looked at my sheet. So
yeah. But it made sense because, Help was like, I don't know what to do in this situation. Fortran was like, this is not what I want. Like, I want to help these programs. They shouldn't be dealing with this. And of course, my character's like, everyone should feel joyful and happy, and this poor program is sad. So I think it was kind of a cool moment. Do we all get our advantages back?
I was gonna say, it made sense that Firewall was the one that actually then solved that problem, right? Like, we were all like having a bit of a crisis, and Firewall was like, no, I can make sure that you're not feeling it. And I thought that was really beautiful.
That was sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Firewall's probably seen some stuff, just from, but like
literally, you've seen some stuff. You probably recorded it.
I recorded it too. For when I asked if taking them out of the wall would stop causing them pain, does that mean they would have died?
In my head, what it meant was you were probably going to end up with a half a program.
Oh,
like
I'm really
because
glad we
the
didn't
lower
take it out of the wall.
the lower half of their body was effectively melded with the wall in
Yeah.
such a way that they like you could potentially like, and then they could be repaired and they could be dealt, you
Rebuilt.
could have done that. You could have like gone up there and like chopped them off and like just taken the upper half of the body with them, because when you're a program effectively kind of like a robot sort of, they're not going to bleed out like you if that was a human being in the game and they were embedded in a wall like that, like they're a whole different set of circumstances you're dealing with. So that was a possible outcome that you could have gone after, but it also would have brought a little bit of the horror side of a game
Question.
like this to bear.
What was in the other room that we were hearing all of the noises coming from, like with all the programs? The one with a bunch of them in there.
And was it
It
breakdancing?
was mass panic. It was mass panic. It was there was a doomsayer who was convinced that there was something like that they were like there's something terrible going on and we're never going to get it fixed and we need to leave or we need to like I wasn't sure where I was going to go with it. Ultimately it would kind of depend on like how you first approached it. I would have found an interesting way to go, but it was basically a doomsayer who was getting a bunch of different programs riled up, and there could have been like a kind of a riot situation or a big fight.
That's kind of the vibe I got from it, was like a riot was about to break out kind of a thing.
Ooh, maybe we could have calmed them down and got an army with us. We would have calmed them down.
But when I gave it a name, because this is one of the weird things that happens inside Scoop again, everybody. When we're planning this, I'm talking to Margaret. Don't even have the cast on board yet. Margaret wants to start getting the cast together and start putting together assets and things. And so I need to give a name to the show, the adventure, and I don't know for sure what it's going to be. And so I wanted to do something with control, because in the game book, the location of control, like what was starting to happen there, is talked about in control. And in the game book, what happens is at each of the locations, there's a description of like the location, some of the programs that are there, some of what's going on, and then there's a brief discussion about things that happen during the course of the collapse, because the collapse is tracked in the game as collapse phases 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. When you hit collapse phase 5, everything, that's it, it's over. And at each phase, things can happen. So like if the characters don't do anything, they don't go to control, this is what happens in control. Like this, there's an evolving world. The world is constantly changing. And so it's well, just a suggestion. You could always go, a GM could take it wherever they want, but it sets that up. And that's one of the things that gets talked about in the book, is like, there's this code zombie outbreak and how that is handled. Had you not been there, had the protagonists of the campaign not been there, there would have been a progression of what happened there, and you were in the early stages of it.
That's pretty cool. I like it. You had said that this game had gone through multiple renditions. Are you comfortable talking a little bit about that? I think it's interesting from people who we've played a lot of tabletop RPGs, but maybe some folks haven't created them themselves, and kind of like how that works, the process of creating a tabletop RPG.
Sure. The initial version of Code Warriors was started after Capers was out. And those of you familiar with Capers know that it uses a playing card system. Everybody has a deck of cards. You're flipping one card at a time.
You can watch it on our channel. If you search Capers, there's Dot's in that too. So it's very, very good. There's a multi-part. Dot's voice for that character is so good. It's one of my favorite.
But I really liked the Caper system, and I was kind of toying around with like iterating it into other games. And so at one point I was developing Code Warriors using the playing card system from Capers, and I took it down the road to developed a bit of the world, developed all the program types, and created their abilities and so forth, but using that system. And I took it to Gen Con in 2019, and I ran 3 sessions of it at Gen Con, and noted in the description that this was a playtest. And I ran 3 sessions, and we had a good time and we enjoyed it and everything, but there was some things about it, and it was hard for me to put my finger on it, but there were things about it that just weren't working. And I toyed around with this and that, and I just kind of got to a point with developing it that I was just like, I just don't have the solution. I don't know what is going to happen, where I can go with this. So I did what I refer to as putting it on the shelf. I put it on the shelf. It's like, will I go back to it? Will I take it off the shelf again? I don't know. Die Laughing went through multiple iterations over the course of several years. It changed quite a bit. I tried all sorts of different things to it until I hit on like one or two things that kind of like made it all fall together. And so Code Warriors did the same thing. I put it on the shelf for a while, and time went by, and I designed these other things, and I did Good Strong Hands, and that has its own system. And then I iterated that into Nowhereville, and when like at the point where I was like, oh, this is actually a pretty versatile system. If I just tweak a couple things for the genre, I wonder if I can make this system work for Code Warriors. So I just dove down that rabbit hole and hit on the things like the overload track and glitches are like probably the biggest things in the system, because when you roll multiple successes in Good Strong Hands, it's different. You've got corruption or the shadow track that you fill up, and that gives you corruptions. And if you get too many corruptions, you get 3 corruptions, and then you fill it up again, you die, or you get corrupted by the void, you become a bad guy, right? You hand your character sheet to the GM, and it's like, I'm all yours now.
I love when the GM lets me be that guy. There might be a show that I was with Craig on.
Yeah, we did that once.
Was it Die Laughing?
No, it was Stage Heroism. You were there.
I was there. I remember that moment. I was like, but was there another one?
No.
I have a question. It's to do with a rumor that I heard.
Ooh.
Oh.
Yeah. It's a game design rumor that I heard about Nerdburger Craig, and I heard it from a pretty good source, I think.
The feeling I have a feeling my words are going to get used against me, but go ahead.
It is. It was you. You said it. You said that you very often have in your design process like a challenge that you're like, I want to do a game that uses cards, or I want to do a game that does this. Like there's you'll have sometimes like a conceptual challenge that will then spur you on. And I thought it was like, oh, well, maybe the conceptual challenge was D8s, because so few games really utilize D8s to their full loveliness. But then it seems like that wasn't the way it went with this one. So I was just wondering if you could talk about this cool thing that when you said that, I was like, oh, that's so cool that Greg does that. About like the kind of the conceptual challenge you have that inspires you to make sort of games. I thought that was neat.
Yeah, that started with like the first games, like Murders and Acquisitions was, I'm just like, can I make a game? Period. Mm-hmm. Capers was, can I make a game that uses nothing but playing cards? Die Laughing was, can I make a horror game where your character gets killed and you still have something to do that isn't just make a new character? And so that's gone through iterations with different things like, what once went wrong was, can I recreate Quantum Leap? And more importantly, this is something you'll learn when you read the game and you play the game, is how in Quantum Leap, Sam and Al discover what the big thing is that needs to be changed together. Yeah. Al has all these ideas, and Sam keeps trying things until they finally figure out what it is. And it's always kind of a surprise to Al as well. And what once went wrong does that. The GM doesn't know what the thing is that needs to be changed. The GM discovers that with the player. So that was the challenge of like, you're going to GM a game, but you're not going to know the end.
Oh, that's cool.
You're gonna get to discover it. It's going to be a surprise for you. And with Code Warriors, I think it was part of the challenge was iterating on the roll track system again into another genre. But the biggest challenge in there that I kind of set for myself was, because of the nature of the game, that world would have been absolutely anything. It could have looked like absolutely anything. And so it was the challenge of creating a world from the ground up without any frame of reference built around it. Like Capers is like, oh, it's an alternate history 1920s. So it's got all of this frame of reference that everybody understands about the 20s, but with these differences. And the other games that I've done have always had like, some grounding in like tropes or specific history or, like felt friendship and feelings is like, well, if you know the Muppets, you know how this game plays. Whereas this is like not specific. This is a mashup of a bunch of different things. And the world of the computer world that it is, I mean, it could be absolutely anything. Like, so I found myself like thinking about like, well, what is it all about? What's up with computers? Like, old video games and stuff. So like when you get into the game book, you're going to see that there's like an 8, because the 8 the 8 keeps repeating, right? D8s and 8 points on the track. There's an 8x8 grid that is the entire world. It's a 2-dimensional world that's just a grid. But then you make rolls to determine where different sectors that get affected by the collapse and different things can happen to them, so that the grid can change. The grid of the world can change very significantly, and what it all looked like. And you'll see in the artwork that rather than having the toughest challenge for the look of it was, how do you make this computer generated world that has all this colorful artwork look like the apocalypse without just making it dull? Because apocalypse stories tend, when they're like set in like worlds like Earth, they tend to become everything scratched and dirty and broken down, and looks like it hasn't been maintained. But this is a completely new world. Like, it doesn't necessarily all going to look like things we would recognize. And so it became like, instead in this, the earlier you are in the collapse, the more detail there is to everything. The more you can see, like, oh, this is like this form, that form, that form, and then like as the collapse progresses, you see things breaking apart and pieces fall off, and you see the wireframe of the computer graphic underneath. And so that's rather than having it get dark and dull, because that would, I think, be a disservice to the artwork, to have a bunch of it be kind of like not as exciting and colorful and deep and rich. So it became more of like you're stepping backward in computer graphics. Things get simpler and simpler. Landscapes become like, Battlezone, where it's just like,
I like it.
Gridded plains and things.
I definitely had fun when I was making the overlays, because I was trying to be really inspired by the art that you did. And so if you look, you can see like the little squares and stuff in the background, but try to keep like the colors bright. And Craig approved it, so I'm assuming it fits in line with what he wanted. I do have a question from chat, and this goes actually to the cast, so we'll go around and let everyone answer this one. This is from Papa Tim 68, and they want to know, what were the inspirations, or how did you get your idea for your characters, and was there any IT specific knowledge that like you drew from for your character? So we'll start with Academic Foxhole. What about Fortran? What was the inspiration?
Well, so we had this thing of this collapse, right? And Craig was talking about like power and things coming in and off, and I thought, and I was like, well, I wanted to pick I picked a type that was not one of the types everybody else picked, so I picked the sort of the big beefy bruiser, the virus scanner, and I thought,
thank you.
We'll be kind of,
I think I would have got really hurt.
It's like, I'm here for you, and I thought, what would be kind of interesting is I played like a program. Mainly because I had just been like weirdly I found an old USB drive that had like a huge amount of data on it, like so much memory. It turned out it was like not a lot of memory. It was really old, and I was like, oh.
I know, I like that you were like, this is how much memory. I was like, that's not very much.
It was not very much. And I thought, what if I play an old program that maybe once the collapse happens, this old program like wakes up, right? And I was also thinking because like my computer crashed and I had to hand transfer everything over rather than automatically transfer. And I was like, oh, that's a program from. Like, I've been transferring data from computer to computer for a long time, and there's some really old programs in there that are not there anymore. And so I thought, what if I play a really old program, right? Something that had just like woken up and that doesn't take as much energy in some ways. And then I thought, okay, you know what? Post-apocalypse, right? Old program, escape from New York. Ernest Borgnine is the taxi cab driver, and like, I'll be the taxi cab driver, and I'll be like the one that like, I've been around the block. If you want to know I know the old way. I know a shortcut. That kind of person. So I thought I would do like the old Fortran program, which was like from 1957, and so that language happened. I thought that'd be kind of cool. And I know that one of my foci was becoming useful again. So my character's not worried about becoming obsolete, but they are seen as obsolete. And how can they make themselves useful in this sort of modern? Basically, like the collapse is like a new life for them, right? So how do you become new and useful in this new world? Right, and that was kind of like the post-collapse was kind of like a new chance. And I didn't get to do it, but I wanted to have one of my foci be Silver Screen as like the new leader. But then we just didn't have a chance to talk about it yet.
And of course, Katie, what about you? What was the inspiration for your character?
I just, as I was going through the character, the system types that you could do, I just really loved the fact that I could be a firewall incarnate, kind of, or like someone who susses out like Trojan horses and things like that and be that part of the system, but like an actual representation. So I've always loved hackers and movies and things like that. So I was just immediately excited to be playing a computer program. But I didn't have like a specific inspiration. I just think I got to be a computer program, which was exciting to me. I just love that I got to do that. So, but yeah, I love the idea of having like that security and being the program that guards things. The one that kind of throws up the shield and goes, no, you don't let that virus in here, and kind of standing up for those who.
Yeah.
Honestly, I thought about elderly people and how they click on things they shouldn't. And I was like, Firewall's kind of the person or the program who's going to step in and be like, hey, stop taking advantage of people.
Yeah.
The viruses.
I like
So
that.
that's kind of what my character was inspired by.
Love it. Dot, what about you?
But I feel like mine was kind of obvious. Mine was definitely inspired by the program used to manage like the customer service UI piece of almost any piece of technology or software that you use. But I definitely wanted to bridge on the edge of like, as most customer service software, is this actually helpful? Right, because so many times, I mean, every time you pick up a phone and you're talking to a robot, it's like, press 1 for blah blah, press 2 if you did not find what you're looking for, stay on the line until somebody picks up, and you're like, none of
Zero.
Yeah, why is there no number for me to press? Like, I feel like that's a little bit a part of what I wanted to build this program help as, is like, they want to be helpful and they believe they're helpful, but the question of how helpful they actually are is really in the user interface piece, is really so yeah, that's kind of what it came from, is like I wanted the helpful but not helpful program.
Craig and I immediately thought of Clippy.
Yeah, I was gonna say we
We were
joked about
like,
Clippy.
yes.
Clippy. We were joking about Clippy because Clippy was helpful, but sometimes not helpful. Also,
Not
you could change
helpful at
Clippy to
all.
be other things if you didn't know. Like Clippy could be like a cat
know that.
or a dog. Yeah, you could change
you could
it.
change Clippy, but that's exactly, it was basically Clippy, so it's also like not even a really super duper updated customer service like UI. So yeah, they had some needs around not becoming obsolete and some other things like that, but really what they were desperately looking for is reconnection with the operator, because a help program is not anything without the operating system. And right now they're apart from it, so they're actually even more unhelpful because they can't get back to the operating system. So they were really just trying to put the system back together so that they didn't become obsolete in the larger scheme of things, not really in how old they are, but in their actual purpose and design. So,
Well, Silver Screen thought all of you were helpful.
what about you, Maggie?
From Silver Screen, I was thinking of, I'm like, man, people are going to definitely make programs that are super helpful. And I was looking at some of the different upgrades and features you could have. And I was like, what if I'm just like kind of useless? Like I'm the type of program that all I do is like service you Netflix videos that I'm like trying to figure out which one's the best option for you, right? Like I do nothing else that's like super useful. But I thought it could be more of like a distraction. I could make noises. I could like grow big or small if we needed something for size. Kind of just taking people's attention. I had like persuasion type of things that I could do, but we never really got in a situation that was necessarily needed.
In my mind's eye, I pictured you as a social media program.
You're
basically
very useful.
Me too. Like, how many times did we get benefits because you were distracting people by scrolling through Instagram or like whatever the program does?
Just distract them from their lives. Yeah. I was like, I think it's just an entertainment bot or like a program, something that just like no matter what you need, I'm there to just basically make people zombie mode look at me, right? But thank goodness Fortran was there to take the damage, because sure, I can handle distracting them, but I cannot handle the heat. I'm one body. I wanted that flaw though, because I think that's cool. Yeah. And if I would have gotten derezzed or something, I think that would have been neat to showcase that as well from the GM perspectives. But
I want to say something I thought was cool. It's sort of similar to you and I in the sense that my character is built to murder things. I can hit things real hard, but I did not do any hitting at all. I did not hit anything once,
which is interesting.
Because I was like, oh, well, you don't want to kill things. Okay, right? Because Sav programs are kind of followers, not leaders. And when you're like, we don't want to kill things, like, oh, okay. And I liked that I could still, just like you were distracting things to keep things to make sure those monsters were, the aberrants were not directed at the people that were like poking at it. I like that I was able to like step in and take that physical damage for you, or try to do things that, even though I'm like really combat built, that I was still able to do things, even though I wasn't using the things that the character was built for. And I always love when a system lets you do that. I thought that was pretty awesome.
Our characters just kind of worked really well together. I loved how we all just fell into line with what we would do as programs.
Yeah.
And falling into our flaws too. There were moments where each of us were like, I'm not helpful here.
I feel like this rule set too would lead well to a lot of really cool conversations with, like, I would have loved to have a conversation with each one of them about their purpose and why they do what they do. And like, even like Silver Screen to be like, why do you think entertainment is so important, or helping? Like, do you feel like you need help? Or say like Fortran, just, I mean, honestly, there's just so much you could explore role play wise too, which I think is so interesting because you never think about being a computer program.
Yeah,
so,
and there's also just like, was it me, like in my mind, I don't know if it's true, but in my mind, because of my computer crashing recently, like we are programs in a computer. There's something very wrong with this computer. Maybe whoever is running it is not even maybe we're in a pawn shop, or who knows where we are. Like that we're
or what is it, Geek Tech or whatever, that's trying to like reboot us, you know?
I was thinking, you know, the what's the undercover boss, where like the boss is actually using the computer for the first time and is like, why is this thing running so slow, and like beating it.
Or it's an elderly woman who's it's her computer and
she accidentally clicks some porn.
Yeah, and then she's got too much junk into that computer, and there was like something real. I think you can do to sort of yes and Katie. I think there's some really cool. We started touching on it, and if we had like a 4-shot or a little bit longer, I can't imagine what we would have done. There's some really big existential questions, right, to ask about our world, right? Like, we live in the Matrix, but it's like, what does it mean to be a help program if there's nobody accessing the help systems? You know, what does it mean to be the firewall? And there's just more and more of these things coming. Like, I imagine that would have been very stressful for Firewall, right? As these things break down, like that's your job, right? Is to hold that line in certain ways, and to find those problems, but there are just more and more of them happening. Like, I think there's some really interesting about how we could have got some really deep computer RP out of this. Like if we had just like, a couple more sessions.
Oh no, Squishy Chameleon. They have 482 tabs open in their browser. Oh no.
Hey Squishy, rock on. I understand that.
Who else is a multi-tab opener? I am not. I am like oh no.
I have so many tabs open all the time.
I clear tabs every day.
Me too. I only have the ones I need open, and one of my coworkers has millions, and all you can see is the little icon next to them. I'm like, how do you know which tab you're supposed to click on?
Like a to-do list.
Yes.
Hey, Squishy, you know what you get when you have that many tabs open? You get a collapse. That's what you get. You get a big old computer collapse. Are you gunning for a collapse? Is that what you're doing?
Another cool story would be, and you inspired this, Academic Foxhole, is if you were a program that's being transferred from one computer to another, that would be kind of really cool to follow their journey.
Oh.
Yeah.
Reboot a hard drive or build a hard drive.
But something's corrupted in like the transfer process. Ideas for you, Craig.
You could be like on a USB and you're like a recon mission going in to save a crashing computer.
That's so cute.
I love it. All right. Well, I know that we've gone a little bit longer than we were expected for this after show, but we hope that you all enjoyed it. And of course, Craig, thank you again for taking us on this journey, this out of control, or should we say in control now, journey of Code Warriors.
More control,
yeah, more in control,
slightly more in control.
Slightly more in control. And we hope that you all enjoyed kind of getting a glimpse into what an after show looks like for a show, but we always kind of it's a good decompression, and you get a little insight into why the characters took actions that they took, or in this case, at the end of a show, we always like to answer questions that the viewers might have. But we will see you all again in the future for more shows. Obviously, we have shows right now, Thursdays and Saturdays, 10 a.m. Pacific. Definitely tune in, twitch.tv/roll for it. And of course, check out Code Warriors. You can click the link down below, or if you do exclamation code warriors in our Twitch chat, you will see that as well. So thank you all so much. Toodles.